Hi, this is Rick Horton. This is my EDL 854, Module 16. This is the case study. Um, on this case study, what we have here, the scenario is Mr. Stevens is a principal at George Washington Middle School. Everyone really likes him, the PTA, the Booster Club. He has to rely a lot on volunteers to help him to cover athletic events because there's no assistant principal. Parents volunteer a lot for him. One of the parents that typically does a lot of volunteering is Mrs. Bowman. Her daughter recently tried out for an all-state cheerleader. Um, she made the all-state team. She was invited to a holiday parade in New York. Mrs. Bowman has asked Mr. Stevens if the PTA could fund the trip for their daughter. Mr. Stevens told her no because the funds need to go for something that will benefit a majority of the student body and not just one person. After the request, Mrs. Bowman was volunteering at an athletic event and money turned up missing from the gate. Problem identification. What do I know? What do I need to know? And identify the problem. What I know about George Washington Middle School, it's located in the middle of an old residential area in a large city, approximately 450 students. It has a declining student population and families are moving to the suburban areas. More about George Washington Middle School, socioeconomic levels of the families has also declined. Most parents work at a textile mill. Community involvement remains strong, though. Parents frequently volunteer for the school activities. The students at this school participate in volleyball, track, and they have cheerleading tryouts. Mr. Stevens, what do I know? He's the principal for the last 4 years at George Washington Middle School. He's well liked by students, parents, and teachers. He works well with the PTA and the Booster Club. He has no assistant principal. He relies heavily on parent volunteers. Mrs. Bowman, Alice Bowman, she often volunteers to either manage a concession stand or work the gates. She has 3 children. She has 2 sons that have already completed their time at George Washington Middle School, and daughter Lucy is a 7th grader that managed the cheerleader at George Washington. Also, Mrs. Bowman, she requested that the PTA pay for Lucy's New York trip. She volunteers at basketball games. She volunteered at a basketball game. This is after her request was denied. She claims that tickets 78 and 88 were damaged. There's a $50 bill missing, but the ticket receipts balance. Lucy Bowman, she's a 7th grade student. She's well recognized. She was recognized as an all-state cheerleader. She's skilled in cheerleading and stunts and routines. She's been invited to the all-state cheerleaders in New York to march in a trip. The trip is going to cost $798. Mr. Dumas. Mr. Dumas, where he comes into this is he paid with a $50 bill, and the $50 bill is no longer with the gate. He's a foreman at the textile mill. Excuse me, by the way. He cashed his check that day. He arrived to the game during the first quarter and used a $50 bill to pay his way into the game. What do I know? Mrs. Bowman has requested that the PTA pay $798 to pay for her daughter's trip to New York. Mrs. Bowman worked the gate at Monday's basketball game. Mr. Dumas paid with a $50 bill to get into the game. There's no $50 bill in the bank bag. Mrs. Bowman left a note saying the tickets 78 through 88 were damaged. The proceeds balanced if the tickets were damaged. What do I know? Or what do I need to know? I'm sorry about that. What do I need to know is what was done with the damaged tickets. Were they thrown away? Were they discarded? They should have been put back in the bank bag for evidence that the tickets were damaged. Was the $50 bill needed for something else? Did the concession stand come with some smaller bills and trade it out? Was change needed somewhere else? Is there another reason where that $50 bill could be gone? And is this the first time that Miss Bowman has volunteered and the money not balanced? If it's a frequent thing, that's one thing. Or if this is the first time it's ever happened, I think that's something else we have to look into. Is Lucy planning on going to the New York trip if the PTA doesn't pay for the trip? I mean, if they're not going to go, I think that's something we need to know. And the note says that 78 through 88 were torn. That's 11 ticket, but the bank bag balance is if 10 tickets were ruined. Is this just a mistake? Is it something that was typed up wrong in the case study? Just one of those inconsistencies that I caught, and I'm not real sure what we're doing with yet. What do I need to know? What is the school policy for theft or fraud from a parent? Is $50 enough to notify local authorities? Has the superintendent been notified? Was Mrs. Bowman working that gate alone, or did she have a volunteer with her? Has anyone else had access to that bank bag? I mean, maybe there's another person we're not even thinking about where it wasn't Miss Bowman. Does anyone else know about the torn tickets? Did anyone else witness them, or did they see them? When somebody came in and tried to pay their way into the game, did they notice that the tickets are torn and she discarded them? Is there any other way the school could help fund Lucy's trip? I mean, is there any other? Does the school know of any other people that might be willing to donate, or some businesses or some corporations around town that might also be willing to help fund Lucy's trip? Identify the problem. And the problem in this case scenario is somebody's possibly being dishonest. There could be a theft from the school. We need to find out what happened to the tickets and the $50 bill. Plan of action with appropriate strategies for implementation. First, I would contact the superintendent and see what the school's policies are. I'd contact Mrs. Bowman to set up a face-to-face meeting. I think this is something that we can't talk about over the phone or email or anything like that. And just ask her if there's a logical reason why the $50 bill is missing. I mean, maybe there is. Like I said, maybe somebody came and got changed. Maybe the person decided not to pay with that. They found other ways to pay. Or, maybe someone else came in and said, hey, don't use that money, and slipped them a $5 or whatever. So maybe some other person gave him money for that. I mean, is there a logical thing of what happened? Is this the first time that she volunteered and money's turned up missing? By bringing her and having a face-to-face conference, she's aware that Mr. Stevens does follow proper procedures for counting money and double checking things. So, she was asking for almost $800. Only $50 is missing. This way it's saying, we double check everything. We know something's missing. We know something's wrong. It's just a way maybe to deter future losses from happening. If it's not the first time that she's volunteered and money's come up missing, then I would say we don't allow her to volunteer at any more events. Talk to the superintendent again and see if the authorities need to be notified. I just think that we really have to follow board policies, and we really have to make sure the superintendent's in the loop. And what we're going to do, again, we have to follow board policies in these kind of situations also, where we can't play favorites and notify the police this time and not notify the police next time. We just have to follow what the school's policies are. Review the procedures for the athletic events. Never have only one person taking money at a gate. There should always be someone there as a witness. People are less likely to take money or do something wrong if there's a second person sitting there with them. There's just always needs to be two people at each gate or concession stands. Even if, and I think I have this in another part where if someone has to go to the restroom or something, have a floater, or the principal be the floater where, hey, have a walkie-talkie with you. This person needs to go to the restroom, and he comes over there and sits there for a little bit. We need to have a procedure for if tickets are damaged. They need to be placed in the bank bag and not destroyed. This ensures that the damaged tickets were not used. We all see that they're damaged. The principal can, sign off on it, then initial off on it, sign off on it. But there needs to be some type of evidence that the tickets were actually damaged. And again, have two volunteers count the proceeds and fill out the ticket receipt. Require both the volunteers to sign the receipt stating how much money was received and how many tickets were sold. So this way, we're having the volunteers also be held accountable for how much money is there and how many tickets were sold. It's just another way it's just another check and balance. And if we ever did have any worries about a principal, it could be a way to keep them honest also when they count the money that night. Both those numbers should line up that way. Resolve the issue. Meet with the superintendent to see if there's any board policies that need to be followed. Create new checks and balances that I discussed on the previous slides if possible. Meet with Ms. Bowman to see if there's any plausible explanation of where the $50 bill went. Ask Mr. Dumas if he's sure he paid with the $50 bill. I stated earlier that maybe somebody didn't want him to have to pay with the $50, so they slipped him some money. Maybe he thinks he did, but then after he thought back about it, he remembers he found a smaller bill. There could be some possibilities where Mr. Dumas didn't actually use the $50 bill. We have to follow board policies. That's the big thing here. Create a checklist of all expectations, policies, and procedures, and give a copy to the volunteers that work the event. If this is the volunteer's first time, go over that list with them. Earlier in this class, we created like a flyer that was for ticket sales. This would be a great time to use something like that. be able to hand it to our volunteers, have it laminated right there. They see what all their expectations are for the night, so they know how to count the receipts, how to count the money, how to count the sold tickets, and that way all the money's right there and documented. Have more than one volunteer at each gate and concession stand. Again, people are going to be more likely to be dishonest if they're by themselves. They're going to be less likely if there's someone else around them. The principal needs to be available to give volunteer breaks for the restroom or if something else comes up. If this is not possible, have a floater. Have somebody, a volunteer that's their job is to go around and give breaks to people at these athletic events. Debrief the problem by reflecting. What was I thinking? Mrs. Bowman asked for $798. Why would she take just $50? Has this ever happened before? Why were the damaged tickets thrown away? Why were they not put in the bank bag? It wouldn't have taken up that much space. They shouldn't have just been discarded. They should be around somewhere. Was Miss Bowman the only volunteer at that gate? And what are the board policies? What was I feeling? Why would she do this for just $50? Why would you ruin your credibility with the school district for $50? Was she upset about the decision not to fund the trip? How's the rest of her family going to feel if this is true and it happened? And just concerned for her family. What am I valuing? That Mrs. Bowman is on her third child to go to George Washington Middle School. She obviously has thought enough of the school to send all three of her kids there. She's always volunteered. She's always been there. I'm also proud of her daughters, valuing her daughter's accomplishments. Her daughter had to have worked hard to, become an all-state cheerleader. Mr. Stevens' dedication to school, the way he, takes care of everything and tries to do the best he can, and the way he followed procedures and double-checked the bank bag and everything. I think he's trying to do things the right way. Unresolved issues. What happened to the $50 bill and or the tickets? What are the board policies regarding theft? Do we have to contact law enforcement over $50 theft? Set parameters for PTA support. And what I mean here is just have a set guidelines. So, if it's for a one-person trip, the PTA won't step in. Just how many students need to be required, how many things. Just if we have a set guidelines for what the PTA will and will not support, I think it'll be easier on parents when they come in to ask. Give volunteers a checklist for procedures. And has this ever happened before? What did we do in the past when we thought theft had happened? Reflections on Standard 8. As a leader, promote academic success, the well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school and school district to promote social and academic learning. In this scenario, the building principal is promoting success in several ways. First, that he did not fund the trip for one person. He's he wants to use majority of the money on the student body and not just on one student. He recognized the cheerleader in the announcements, and he told Mrs. Bowman that it's a great accomplishment and he's proud of her daughter. Mr. Stevens also secures a gym and takes the money, the bank bags out with the security guard. Mr. Stevens counts the money in front of the security guard to have a witness. The security guard escorts him to the bank for the night deposit, and he carefully reviews accounting sheets and inventory to ensure accuracy. Component 1. As a leader, I would review all the procedures and evaluate what needs to be changed and ensure the profits from these events go to the students. We need to ensure that there is no theft or fraud. We also need to have 2 volunteers working the gate and require that all damaged tickets be put into the bag. The accounting sheet should have both signatures from both times, the security guard and the principal, and both people who volunteered at the things. Finally, set written guidelines for what PTA funds can be used for. Component 2. As a school leader, I would see to it that our school funds go to the majority of the students. I would want to make school purchases that can enhance learning to a majority of our students. I also know that new technologies for our classroom or purchases for the majority of students can help build a positive environment to our building when we have a building where students want to be there and want to enhance our learning. Component 3. As a school leader, I'd want to see our school funds go to the majority of the students. I want to make sure that school purchases can enhance student learning for a majority of the students. I know there can be new technologies in our classrooms. There are a lot of new technologies that can be used to enhance student learning. This would be an item such as a 3D printer, VR glasses, or even license to go with websites. I know we have a lot of good teachers at almost every school, but really good teachers can become great teachers when we enhance technology into their lessons. So we should use these funds to make sure that, and not just that, we can also use these funds to help get new uniforms for the athletics, get things like that. Because you'd be shocked just when we get new uniforms, every 4 or 5 years, it really makes us kids have another little bit of self-pride and self-awareness. It makes them want to go out for the sports. It makes them want to do the activities. And when that happens, the more kids that we have being active, the more pride that they have in the school. And I think that's what we want. Thank you.